everybody. Thanks for coming to our Monday night Q&A. My name is Justin O'Donnell. I am the Libertarian Party candidate for U.S. Senate here in New Hampshire. So, first things first, we're going to get things started with just like topic of the day, discussion of the day, and we're going to be taking questions as we go. If you guys want to leave a comment right on the Facebook Live video, I'll be able to see all the questions, and we're going to be taking questions as we go throughout, and we're going to do this as long as we can, as long as it feels good. First thing, though, topic of the day, as far as relevance, this is a Senate race. I'm running for United States Senate against Jean Shaheen and Corky Messner. And the United States Senate came into big news today. Why? Well, we have Supreme Court nomination hearings. And one thing everyone wants to know of everyone running for U.S. Senate right now is where they are on the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. Judge Barrett was nominated by Donald Trump to fill the vacancy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who had recently passed. And the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell going back on his words to never confirm a nominee during a election year, has decided to rush through this nomination and fill the vacancy as soon as possible before the Supreme Court resumes its session to hear landmark cases that are going to decide the constitutionality of the Obamacare law, the Affordable Care Act, as well as potential reviews to Roe v. Wade and other landmark Supreme Court Supreme Court cases. This nomination is contentious based on its timing, and I believe one of the biggest disservices the United States Senate is doing right now is the manner in which they're considering things isn't based on the merits of Judge Barrett, is not based on her judicial views or her principles. They are discussing merely her nomination by Trump in an election year as a disqualifying measure. Now, just because it's an election year doesn't mean the president stops being the president. And just because it's an election year does not mean the president does not have a duty to nominate someone to fill that vacancy as soon as possible. It's incumbent upon the U.S. Senate to hold these hearings and consider the merits of the nominee based on their principles, based on their legislative history, their judicial history, and their legal beliefs. It's unconscionable that we would sit here and act like Republicans were in the right 4 years ago when they refused to even give Judge Merrick Garland hearings because it was an election year. But two wrongs don't make a right. And to sit here and have people contest that Judge Barrett it shouldn't be considered for the office simply because of when she was nominated and who was she nominated by would not be an equal right to contest the fact that Judge Garland did not get equal fair say. So as far as where I would stand on the confirmation of Judge Barrett, it would have to come down to her actual beliefs and her judicial standing. And those are things we'll get to hear more of in the next few days over these confirmation hearings. Unfortunately, I tried to watch as much of the confirmation hearings as I could today. The senators on the committee chose not to focus on the ins and outs of judicial policy and legislative policy and landmark Supreme Court cases and precedent and judicial activism versus contextualist and originalist interpretations of the Constitution. They chose instead to focus purely on the timing of the nomination, and they did a great disservice to the American people today, in my opinion. So that out of the way, we're going to go towards taking some questions. First question we have from Amanda. Amanda, you're looking to move from Oregon to New Hampshire because of our libertarian beliefs. You've done a lot of research and be visiting various points next year. What are some of the things I want to preserve in New Hampshire, and what are things I would want to implement or change? That's a fantastic question. Now, it is more about local politics. I am running for U.S. Senate, but I do appreciate your asking the opinion, Amanda. some of the wonderful things about New Hampshire, I think, apart from just what a beautiful state it is, some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. Our major city, Manchester, which is where I live, is an hour from the mountains, hour from the ocean, an hour from the business centers in Boston. We have no income tax for those who work in New Hampshire, and that's a phenomenal thing to live by, is keeping the money that you earn. We have no sales tax on the on goods purchased and sold here in New Hampshire. We do have a small rooms and meals tax. It's kind of targeting tourists. 9% rooms and meals tax on prepared meals and lodging. As far as what I would change, we do have an extraordinarily high property tax burden, and we have a critical lack of affordable housing here in New Hampshire. One of the biggest roadblocks to affordable housing is the fairly restrictive zoning laws and zoning regulations that are impacting the construction of new housing, and the high demand for people moving to New Hampshire and looking for housing, but without new construction to accommodate those, it's driving up the market price of housing. I believe last time I actually looked at it, the specifics was over a year ago, but we had less than a 1% rental vacancy rate here in New Hampshire. And that is telling of a few things. One, people want to live here. We have net emigration from out of state, people moving into New Hampshire every year. We have a growing population because of our New Hampshire advantages, things like no income tax, no sales tax, our lack of gun control, yet remaining as one of the safest states in not just the country, but safest places in the world as far as crime indexes go. We have phenomenal schools, and a lot of that is due to our school choice programs, where parents have a bigger say in the education of their children as they go. But that does come with a pretty high property tax burden, with local zoning regulations that are prohibiting building of new affordable housing. There's a new complex being built in Nashua that's been a heated, contentious issue getting the zoning approval for it over the past few years, but they're building luxury apartments because it's so expensive and difficult to get the approval of local zoning boards to do new construction, to do mass apartment complexes. There are things like required number of parking spaces per unit. There are things like proximity to existing apartment complexes, proximity to downtown business districts, that to restrict them from creating new housing. And that's led to a real shortage in affordable housing and really high rent prices across the state. Which, again, the rent prices, it's not just due to the scarcity, it's due to the high property tax burden that landlords and others have to deal with as well. So those are some things I would really like to change here in New Hampshire, is easing up the restrictions to create new construction, to incentivize more affordable housing construction instead of penalizing. And I want this to be a place where young people can not only grow up, but they can work and live as well. We are seeing a large influx of people moving here from out of state, but we are losing a large part of our younger population as they're graduating college, moving to other states where it's more affordable for them to live in this economy. And that is something I would like to see change, because we want the people that grow up here with the culture of New Hampshire to stay here, because it's a beautiful and wonderful place, and it is what we love. All right, next question. Joseph Scott Bedell. Maine here. Well, you're not too far. I wish Maine had a Libertarian candidate this year as well, Joseph, especially with the dawn of the ranked choice voting in Maine. So you guys have ranked choice voting for your presidential election this year, and you're voting. Now, I've actually been an opponent of ranked choice voting bills in the New Hampshire State House as a lobbyist and as a citizen lobbyist, but due to very, very niche specific issues in the bills, I think any improvement over our first past the post system is an improvement, and I'm excited to see how that plays out in Maine. For Dr. Jorgensen, Howie Hawkins, and all the other third-party candidates on the ballot for president this year, and especially with Maine's split electoral vote system, it's not a winner-take-all system. We could be in for a shock and a surprise. Maybe the American people have finally had enough with the two-party system, and Maine might beat New Hampshire to stay first in the nation. Maine might be the first in the nation to show that something different is possible, and I'm excited to see what happens from our neighbors next door. So thanks for your comment. Next. Greg, thank you very much for your votes, and thank you very much for your constant support this election cycle, especially the last week, getting the word out and helping with the issues with WMUR and NHPR excluding us from the debates. In case you guys follow on social media, Greg has been incredibly outspoken in comment sections on NHPR, WMUR, Mount Washington Valley Economic Council about them hosting debates and excluding me. So Gene Shaheen and Corky Mesner are going to be having debates for the Senate race, and NHPR and WMUR have decided that they were going to exclude me. WMUR actually hasn't officially said anything yet. They haven't even released their criteria. They've refused to respond to official inquiries from the campaign on what we're going to do, what the criteria are going to be, and what candidates they are going to include. When we asked NHPR actually came back to us with an official response and said they were only including Republicans and Democrats, and that their criteria was you needed to be a member of a party with historical success, so a Republican or a Democrat. Unfortunately, we don't have the money or time to fight that legal battle right now. That debate is coming up this week, but we do intend to make sure that our voice is heard. We have a large spend on advertising and social media to try and get the word out and remind people last minute that, hey, there is another option. Just because the media that has a responsibility to fill you in on these things isn't doing so, doesn't mean that you don't have choices. Andrew, speaking of Supreme Court justices, do you feel it should be a lifelong held position, or should it change to a set amount of years? Many people fear the outcomes of elections when a justice slot is open, for the fact that these justices could alter their lives for decades to come. That's a fantastic point, Andrew, and it's a really, really interesting question to pose. The idea of a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court is to take politics out of it. The lifetime appointment should put the justice above politics, because they can't be removed for anything but high crimes and misdemeanors or an impeachable offense, and they're not subject to the political process. Unfortunately, in the past couple of decades, it's a newer thing where they become so highly politicized. People want to look back at history, Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg, two candidates who were as radically opposed to each other as possible, both who have recently passed in the past 4 years, were Justice Scalia was nominated on a 98-2 vote of the U.S. Senate, and Justice Ginsburg was confirmed on a 97-3 vote. And they were held up as the pinnacle elements of the far right and far left on the court. But even to that, they remained lifelong best friends. And Justice Ginsburg gave the eulogy at Justice Scalia's funeral. And she talked about how great they were working together as friends, even though they were ideologically opposed. And that is the demeanor the court is supposed to have. That is what the court is supposed to be. The Supreme Court is supposed to be above politics. Unfortunately, the lifetime appointment and the lifetime tenure of these justices has led to an aging court. It's led to a system where our justice system is held up by load-bearing senior citizens who are experiencing health problems in unprecedented times like a pandemic. And it's created the political divide in this country has created a worst case scenario where when a judge is replaced, they are looking for political judges. Donald Trump had a litmus test. A judge, he would not appoint a judge until they would commit to repealing Obamacare. Their Democrats have said they would not support a judge unless that judge would commit to never considering overturning Roe v. Wade, regardless of the judicial precedents or the judicial situation. And I do think that if we were to establish some kind of a term limit or a set term of Supreme Court justices where one seat or two seats became available every presidential term, and there was an age cap on retirement, and we could phase that in, it could be something to maybe take politics out of the appointment process. If the appointments were to happen at set times, maybe during midterm elections, two seats came up and two were appointed, or some kind of framework where it remained an odd number of justices reported or appointed every so often. That way, barring the death or resignation of a justice or impeachment of a justice, as rare of a circumstance as that is, no president would get more than X number, and it wouldn't matter who's in office to make those appointments. But again, I think that might even more politicize the election process as president, knowing that, hey, there are 2 liberal justices up for their terms are ending, and they will no longer be continuing on the court during the next president's term. If a Republican's elected, they can swing the court to a 7-2 majority for the next 12 years. And that is, again, there's no best case scenario. It's an interesting thing to consider, putting an age cap on the Supreme Court, or a mandatory retirement age as via constitutional amendment, or set terms. I don't think there is one perfect answer. I do know that the system we have right now is widely considered by jurists and judicial scholars to be among the best in the world. But there is always room for improvement. And that's one of the basic fundamental things the United States was built on, was experimenting, the grand experiment of democracy. And this republic built around that experiment. And if our checks and balances have the need to be updated with growing times, then maybe that's something we need to consider. The current composition of the Supreme Court is not the composition it was originally established in. And initially, there were only 3 justices on the Supreme Court. And those 3 justices also served in other judicial roles. They were each the chief justice of a regional circuit court, and that's why they were chosen, is they would oversee the regional courts, and then they would meet yearly to sit on the Supreme Court together. And the Supreme Court grew as more circuits were added. And then there were issues of Abraham Lincoln trying to up it to 15 justices after something he tried to push through got rejected by the court. And that was really the beginning of politicization of the court. But I don't see an easy answer. It is a great question. It is something that we have to debated and workshopped extensively. But fixed terms may not be the best solution for the Supreme Court. However, a mandatory retirement age may, where we may say no matter what age a justice is appointed to the Supreme Court at age 75, they are retired, or they will retire, and that's the time to move on that. Because already we see Justice Ginsburg in her 80s, and Donald Trump appointed a judge in her 40s to replace her. So there's a potential that if and when confirmed, Judge Barrett could serve on the court for the next 40 years. And so people are right to be concerned that the views of the judge appointed could affect their lives for the next several decades, based on the system. So that it is something to consider, and I do thank you for the question, Andrew. Joseph, if elected to the U.S. Senate, where would I stand if the House passed a bill which would end up eliminating the federal income tax? Joseph, I would be all for it. I'd be all for a constitutional amendment repealing the income tax authority of the United States Congress. The income tax is one of the more egregious taxes we have. The income tax is a fundamental piece of government that tells you that you don't own yourself, you don't own the products of your labor, and you don't own the value and worth of your productivity. The income tax is the United States government telling you that no matter how productive you are, how much you work, how much you do, they get a cut. That not everything you make is your own. And I would love to see the income tax repealed at the federal level. I would love to see Congress's taxing authority reduced and diminished greatly. And the arguments people say, how will you build the roads? How will you fund government? Is, well, we've done it before. Prior to the passage of a constitutional amendment that authorized the taxing authority of the United States government onto its citizens, we still had roads, schools, and Army and Navy had won multiple wars. Now I'm not defending getting into a war. War is bad, but we did it without an income tax. And the way that worked is taxes were apportioned amongst the states. And so while the federal government did not have the ability to tax its citizens, each state did. And each state would then pay a portion of its taxes collected, apportioned based on population, to the federal government to help with federal expenses. But at that time, our federal government operated in a minimalistic level. The federal government regulated commerce between the states, negotiated trade and defense treaties with foreign nations, and represented the will of the states and will of the people on the international stage. And that was the role of the federal government. It wasn't to manage healthcare. It wasn't to manage education at the most local level. It wasn't to dictate employment regulations in the various states. And that is the kind of government I myself, along with many libertarians, would love to see the United States get back to. That is our goal. A minimal government whose responsibility is the protection of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and nothing further. So, like I said, our goal is liberty in our lifetimes and nothing more. Because once the government does more, it becomes a problem. And if the government operated at its most basic levels, at a level of simply protecting life, liberty, and property, then it wouldn't need the taxing authority to rob the American people. But above and beyond income taxes alone, it's the central banking schemes. It's the Federal Reserve Bank and the ability of the United States government to borrow endless amounts of money and rob our future generations, not through taxation, but through inflation. People used to think if you worked hard and you saved, you'd be set for later in life. But with borrowing happening at unprecedented rates and the federal government ballooning a federal debt and catastrophically destroying the value of the dollar in the future, it's your savings that are being stolen from you, more than just your income. So along with ending the income tax, we would also need to end central banking, return to a standard-backed currency where the currency could be exchanged for tangible goods. Its value was set and you knew what it was worth. And that would be determined by the marketplace, not by central bankers in New York. All right. Amanda, I wish you were here to vote for me as well. And I do look forward to you guys moving from Oregon. Make sure when you get here, you look us up with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. We're always excited to welcome new movers and new members and new activists who want to get involved and help us preserve the New Hampshire advantage the best way we know how. All right. Now, that's it for the questions right now. I'm happy to take more, but we're going to backtrack a little bit. Andrew had asked about Supreme Court justices. That is the really touching topic and issue of the day with Judge Amy Coney Barrett. And again, I think the biggest issue here is that we have United States senators who are considering Judge Barrett, and not based on her qualifications, not based on her judicial views, not based on her legal views or her history as a jurist, but simply by the fact that she was appointed by Donald Trump in an election year. And I will stand and agree with the Democrats that Mitch McConnell was wrong to deny a hearing to Judge Garland in 2016 during an election year, that Judge Garland should have been given a fair and equal hearing and judged on his merits as a jurist. But I'm also going to stand with the Republicans and say that just because it's an election year, it doesn't mean the president stops being the president. It does not mean that the Senate stops being the Senate. They still have obligations and duties to the Constitution and to the processes in the Constitution. So that is something I would strongly urge people to consider when they go to the ballot boxes. Vote not only if you care about the judicial nomination process. Don't weigh only a yes or no vote on Judge Barrett's confirmation when you cast your vote for your senator or against your incumbent senator, but judge how they interacted in the process, both this year and in 2016. Whether or not they stood to fulfill their constitutional duty as senators to consider Judge Barrett based on the merits of her philosophy and her history as a judge, or if they opposed her nomination simply because she was nominated by Donald Trump in an election year. And those are things that we unfortunately cannot continue to have as driving philosophies in the Senate running this country, because political divisiveness in the upper house of the legislature is going to set the tone for debate publicly for the next 4 years. Jeanne Shaheen, the incumbent senator that I'm running against, along with Maggie Hassan, the senator up for election in 2 years from now, Chris Pappas, the congressman from the 1st District, and Annie Custer, the congresswoman from the 2nd District, have all vocally voiced their opposition to the Senate considering the nomination of Judge Barrett simply because she was Donald Trump's nominee in an election year, not based on her views, not based on her history whatsoever. Or they'll go with baseless attacks that she's unfit to hold the office because she's a Christian. The majority of American citizens are Christian, or I myself am not. But to judge someone's fitness for office based solely on their religion flies in the face of everything this country was built on. And these are the people we have running our country now. On the flip side, Corky Mesner, the Republican candidate in this race, beyond being a carpetbagger from Colorado, who moved to New Hampshire to try and buy a Senate seat, beyond being a Denver Broncos fan, here on Monday Night Football, where the Patriots are supposed to be playing the Broncos in Denver, and proudly displaying his support of our opponents and not our home team. Corky Mesner has built his entire campaign and his entire race on proudly supporting whatever Donald Trump says. Doesn't matter what Donald Trump says. Corky Mesner supports it. It doesn't matter if it even supports historical, traditional Republican values. Corky Mesner supports it because Donald Trump supported it. Corky Mesner's platform includes things like building the wall, continuing to expand our foreign wars and military-industrial complex, banning immigration and kicking immigrants out of the country. Corky Mesner does not represent liberty. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people in the liberty Republican circles here in New Hampshire and the liberty-leaning conservatives and independents who are falling in line behind Corky because he's not Jeanne Shaheen. And I want to take a moment to tell everybody, remind everybody that there are three options on the ballot, that we spent tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of man hours, if not thousands of man hours and volunteer hours, petitioning to make sure that Granite State voters had another choice and had another option this fall. And that option is not just me. That option is Joe Jorgensen for president. That option is Darrell W. Perry for governor, Andrew Olding for Congress in the 2nd District, and Zach Dumont in the 1st District. And these libertarian options, while they may say we can't win, while we may not have the voter support to make an immediate victory and land in the U.S. Senate or in the governor's mansion to effect immediate positive change for a libertarian aspect, what we can do is be the voice of discontent. We can be the voice of protest. And when people vote third party, when you lend your weight to that voice and you lend your voice of support to an alternative, what you do is you show the two major parties that you, as American citizens and as voters, are unhappy with the direction that they are taking the country. The only wasted vote is a vote for someone you don't believe in. And I believe fully in my heart that many people in New Hampshire are getting primed and ready to waste their votes this year because they won't be voting for somebody they support. They'll be voting against somebody they oppose. And Corky Mesner isn't somebody, Republicans in New Hampshire, who pride themselves on their live free and die values and their latent libertarianism buried in their belief structure, should be supporting, because he's not someone whose policies they can fully get behind. He's a tried and true, make America great Donald Trump supporter, and it does not matter what the policy is, he just supports Donald Trump. But on the flip side, New Hampshire is an incredibly progressive state when it comes to the Democratic base. Bernie Sanders won the primary here in 2016. Bernie Sanders has a huge following of support with the Occupy movement that was here back in the day. And New Hampshire has strong, leaning progressive tendencies. Jeanne Shaheen is a party insider who does what she's told, follows Nancy Pelosi's word in the House to the T, and delivers the party line message in the Senate. She has accomplished nothing over the past 12 years in the U.S. Senate except to add $15,000 of debt to each and every New Hampshire voter's head over the course of our lifetimes. And that is something that progressives should not consider worth their support. And again, they'll be voting for her simply because they oppose Corky and his pro-Donald Trump message. And this is a sad state of American democracy and the New Hampshire advantage and the New Hampshire way. Because our motto, read the damn license plate, live free or die. And the worst thing you can do to promote your own freedom is to go to the ballot box and vote for somebody you don't believe in. All right, more questions coming in. Andrew, wouldn't refusing a justice nomination due to religious violations under the Civil Rights Act? Not sure if it applies to federal positions or just private workers. So a nominated judicial office up for a confirmation hearing, unfortunately, no senator can ever be compelled to give you the reason why they vote no or why they vote yes. If that were the case, and the explicit reason for voting against Judge Barrett was the fact that she is a Catholic and a practicing Christian, then there could probably be a case that it was a civil rights violation based on her religious tendencies. However, much like at-will employment in New Hampshire, where your employer doesn't need to give a reason to fire you, and it's a burden to you as someone who's been fired to prove that the reason for your firing was a civil rights violation. A confirmation process for a United States federal judge at any level, especially the Supreme Court, it's a recorded vote, but no senator has to justify the reasoning or rationale behind their vote. They'll be called for a roll call vote. Each senator will vote yes, no, abstain, or present. And at the end of the day, we either will or will not have a new Supreme Court justice. And there is no end run or way about that. The Supreme Court is a position that should be above reproach. Senators shouldn't be required to give their reason. And there have been times in this country's history where someone being devoutly religious could be called into question their ability to provide fair and impartial judgment as a jurist, especially if their religious beliefs conflict with the law of the land or the Constitution. And there are some religions out there whose beliefs do conflict with the laws of the United States and the Constitution of the United States. I don't think it would be improper to question a jurist on their religious beliefs conflicting with the law. However, in the same vein, Judge Barrett has been explicit in her judicial career, in her writings as a law professor and as a jurist, that the separation of church and state is paramount, and the separation of her religious beliefs from her interpretation of the Constitution is crucial for her ability to do her job. So I don't think in this case that is something that can be held against her. Unfortunately, it is something some will hold against her. Gina, thank you for your support, Gina. We can't wait for you to vote for us. Yes, unfortunately, you were not able to register as a Libertarian in New Hampshire this year. The reason for that is, in order to be recognized as a major political party in the state of New Hampshire, a statewide candidate for that party must petition onto the ballot and receive 4% or greater of the general election vote. Now, this year I have petitioned onto the ballot. Normally it's 3,000 signatures. We did win a lawsuit this year to get it reduced to under 2,000 total signatures to get us on the ballot due to the COVID restrictions that hindered us from being able to petition. Now, what we're doing from there is we are actively campaigning. Myself and Darrell W. Perry are both statewide candidates. If either one of us achieves 4% or higher in the general election, then starting in January, you will be able to register as a Libertarian again. We had this in 2016 when Gary Johnson got our ticket over 4% here in New Hampshire when he was running for president. And from 2016 to 2018, you were able to register as a Libertarian in New Hampshire. However, in the 2018 election, we only had one statewide candidate. That was Gilletta Jarvis for governor. And she received just below 2% of the general election vote. And the Secretary of State delisted the Libertarian Party. And everyone who was a registered Libertarian was re-enrolled as an independent. Unfortunately, that's the case. I myself am not even a registered Libertarian because the state won't allow me to. Hopefully, and what we've been driving for is to change that and make it so that in January of next year, I can be the first one in line to register Libertarian again, and I hope you'll be right in line with us. Yep. All right. Amanda. Okay. So student loan debt and student loan forgiveness. Trump and Biden are talking about student loan forgiveness. Trump is entertaining it within a stimulus package. What are my thoughts on student loans and student loan forgiveness? So I pissed off Twitter today because I had a hot take. If student loans were forgiven, it would have been a more effective and more efficient economic stimulus package than the trillions of dollars in corporate bailouts that were handed out to corporate donors to the Republican and Democratic parties earlier this year. The student loan system, controlled and back-channeled by the United States government through the Department of Education, Navient, holds a monopoly on regressive and predatory student loans that target young individuals who aren't given proper financial education in high school, and kids are sold a bill of goods that they have to go to college, they have to get a degree, or else they won't have the ability to compete in the workforce. They won't have the ability to live their lives as meaningfully as they'd like. Unfortunately, this is not true, but impressionable young kids are pushed this way because education funding for schools is largely tied to college placement rates. If a school doesn't have 80% plus of its students go on to college afterwards, they end up losing some of their funding for their school. And this is a tragic abuse of the system as we have it, because these loans are predatory. The education given is often not worth the cost. And the fact that the loans are guaranteed by the federal government creates a system where these unbacked loans with no security to them are handed out willy-nilly, and the cost of education is skyrocketing because the money is available. Anyone can go to college, and anyone can get a $50,000 loan to do it. And unfortunately, the value of the education is decreasing as the saturation of the marketplace in academia is seeing more and more people going to college and less people learning while they're there. I'll be the first to admit, I believe my college degree is worthless. And I went to one of the most prestigious engineering academies in the world, as far as state schools go, is Massachusetts Maritime Academy. And I graduated with $40,000 in student debt. I don't think what I learned was worth $40,000. I think what I learned was worth 2 summers in a library and 2 years working as a door-to-door salesman. And I could have learned far more about communications and management than I could have going to a prestigious academy. Now, on the flip side of that, many people aren't able to pay off those loans because they graduate college, they don't have a meaningful degree, they were sold a bill of goods, they're not competitive in the workplace. Our economy has been stagnant for 10 plus years, and there hasn't been a growth in new professional jobs that these kids can compete for. Plus, the surge in people with college degrees makes it so you need a college degree to get even an entry-level position in most professional sectors right now. And that has led to falling wages. Millennials are the first generation that by 30 have less money than their parents had. And they are buried in insurmountable debt that hinders their ability to actively participate in the workforce, in the economy as productive workforce members. And we see this as rippling effects throughout our economy, where we don't have new small businesses opening up as regularly as we used to. We don't have innovators and entrepreneurs making changes and going out of their way putting our economy on an exponentially upward trajectory like they used to. And a lot of that is due to this debt, because kids need to work for 40 plus hours a week just to pay their rent and their student loan bills. And without any excess expendable income, they're not investing, they're not enjoying themselves, they're not growing the economy, they're not developing new and exciting frontiers in entrepreneurship. They're just trying to get by. And this is not good for the future of this country. Unfortunately, student loan debt is in fact that. It's debt, and a good amount of it's privately held. So if we were to just bail it out, say we're going to wipe out student loan debt, the United States government also signed a contract with these banks that said that the United States government would guarantee the full value of those student loans. So what are we going to do? Do we wipe out student loans to put the economy on the right track and dig out an entire generation from burdensome and unbearable debt, while at the same time handing trillions of dollars in bailouts to private banks who made these predatory loans, knowing full well that these students may not be able to pay them back, but the government would do so on the back end for them, and reward this predatory financial behavior? There is no right answer. But I do believe there is a way forward. Unfortunately, I think the banks need to suffer for what they did. The banks in their hand in burying a generation in debt for corporate profit. If the United States government is to entertain student loan forgiveness, it must forgive all federally held student loans and end the guaranteed student loan program. We should no longer offer guaranteed federal student loans backed by the United States government and the taxpayer to incentivize children to go to college for a less than meaningful education, while we could be incentivizing alternative education paths and trade schools where people can get high-paying, meaningful jobs after just a few years of training without a college degree and without the debt of college. And these are the types of paths forward we need to go to. And by eliminating the Federal Department of Education student loan program and wiping clean the balance of federally held student debt, we'll no longer have the obligation of the budget line to pay and cover for future student loans that revenue is needed to cover. So that could be a potentially debt neutral solution. But then you have to ask, what do you do about all the people who did pay their loans back? The people who could manage it. And I think the answer there is a tax credit. Anybody who managed to make their student loan payments over the past 10 years, and believe me, I know a good number of people who have managed to make all of their student loan payments over the past 10 years, but their balance has only increased because the interest on federal student loans is so high. Those people, for their good faith in making their payments and good attempts to do so, should be given a rolling tax credit moving forward for student loan payments they did make under the program. They should be credited for the amount of money that they did pay the U.S. government for a meaningless bill of goods. And it should be an offset and reduction to their future income taxes. What I don't have a good solution for offhand is, what about the people who didn't go to college and couldn't go to college? They're going to bear the tax burden of any of these plans just as much as everyone else, but they don't see the benefit of that education. And that's something we need to really workshop, not just as legislators, but as libertarians in general. The student loan crisis is an economic crisis that's worse than the shutdowns, worse than the COVID lockdowns. And it's something that will have a generational impact if we don't deal with it. How we deal with it is up for great debate. The requirement is that we do deal with it. So, yes, Amanda, I think Trump entertaining it on the stimulus package is not unforeseen. I believe anybody inside of government who's been paying attention to how the government works could have seen this coming a mile away, that eventually student debt would need to be forgiven, or else it's going to cause a cascading future financial crisis. How they go about doing it in the most ethical, efficient, and fair manner, I don't know. That's something that people a lot smarter than me are going to have to work a long time to figure out. And that's why we have people at research at think tanks like the Cato Institute, or the Mises Foundation, or the American Taxpayer Foundation, or Taxpayers Union, who have people who are a hell of a lot smarter than me, whose entire job is to workshop and find out the best practices and best ways we can do this. Unfortunately, we just need to get people into government who will listen to them. And that's where I come in. That's where libertarians come in. People who recognize that when there is someone smarter than us within a field, we can, in fact, take their advice. Robert, what would be my strategy for cutting federal government spending? What criteria would I use to decide and to prioritize what to cut? First and foremost, Robert, military expenditures overseas in failed nation-building wars. The United States government spent trillions of dollars over the past 20 years engaged in foreign wars and foreign conflict. We bring our troops home. We draw down our military. We don't eliminate the military. We put it into a defensive posture where we still have the strongest defensive military on the planet. We stop wasting trillions of dollars killing people overseas in a failed attempt to experiment with building new nations in our image. Every human being has the right to self-determination. So does every nation and every group. It's not the business of the United States to be going into the Middle East and spending trillions of dollars killing millions of people and destabilizing the region for decades while we have crumbling infrastructure here at home. And foreign policy is domestic policy. When we stop spending these hundreds of trillions of dollars overseas on these failed military adventure projects and nation building projects, we free up a workforce and we free up funding for infrastructure redevelopment and reappraisals here in the United States, here in our domestic programs. There are things in the federal budget that are ballooning out of control that we need to deal with, like Medicare and Social Security. However, they're not my first priority to cut because, again, millions of people rely on Medicare and Social Security to make ends meet. And many of them, it's not their fault they rely on them. Medicare and Social Security helps people with disabilities who are unable to work through to no fault of their own through either medical or circumstantial events. People were sold a bill of goods for generations, again, decades, since the 1940s. The Medicare and Social Security would be there to help them when they retired in old age. We have a generation of people who didn't save, who couldn't save because inflation robbed them of what they tried, but rested comfortably knowing that the U.S. government promised them they would be taken care of in their old age through Medicare and Social Security. So those are not my priorities to cut. They are priorities to reform because they're non-fungible. They are not self-sustaining, and they will not support an aging population. And people in their 30s, like myself, will not have that program to rely on when we're older. And it's important that everyone my age starts to know that, to invest and save for our own futures instead of relying on the government. But in the meantime, we can't willy-nilly be cutting social programs as much as we'd like to because people rely on them. So our priorities of what to cut first are going to be things that hurt everyone and help no one. And that is our military projects. And that is our foreign adventurism and acting like police for the world. Our domestic issues, we may even increase a little with the hundreds of trillions of dollars in savings from our foreign wars and military adventurism decreased. We could even look at possibly increasing spending on things like infrastructure development, and rebuilding our crumbling highways and bridges around the country, and still have a net decrease in the size and scope of government in the federal budget. And those are the criteria we would use. Waste cut first, people cut last. Zach, who should we vote for if we live in New Hampshire's District 1? Well, me. For U.S. Senate, I would say, as the shameless self-promotion here, as you can see my name in the title. But his name's on the screen right now. I'm leaving that comment up. Anybody in the comments or anybody watching, go click on his profile and give him a like. Zachary Dumont. He is the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Congress. He is currently a town councilor. He has been serving in local government, making his constituents' lives better. He has been showing that libertarian policies and libertarian principles can help. And he's been a proof of concept on a local level of how the libertarian message can benefit people at the most local level. And Zach is running for Congress to bring that libertarian message to people in the 1st District against Chris Pappas and insert Republican throwaway mowers himself. Unfortunately, he's also been excluded from the debates, just like I was. So this is something we're moving forward to. I have huge expectations of Zach to be in the coming years to do wonderful things for New Hampshire and for libertarianism. And I urge you all to go check him out if you live in the 1st District, which, if you're unsure, that does include Manchester and the entire Seacoast. Not Nashua and Concord, though. It's a little bit gerrymandered. How about that Jean Shaheen? Maybe I should vote for her. The only reason you should vote for Jean Shaheen, Robert, is if you want more of the same. And if you like the status quo. And now I can't tell you, I can't speak for everyone, but I can't speak for myself. The status quo is terrible. I believe the status quo is a large part of the problems we have here in the United States. We have people like Jean Shaheen, who are career politicians, who served 2 terms as governor, ran for Senate. She's been in the Senate for 2 terms. She's running for re-election. She has spent more time in government then most New Hampshire voters have been alive, and we have nothing positive to show for it. Would you seek ways to combat climate change? Absolutely, Andrew. I personally believe that climate change is a real issue. I do believe that global warming is a problem. I do believe that anthropomorphic or man-made climate change is something we're going to have to deal with in the coming years. All of this is up for debate. All of this is up for unsettled scientific debate. And there are people on both sides debating whether or not man-made action affects the environment, or whether or not climate change, because climates change. That's how the world evolves. I like to break it down into its simplest levels. We can't test, we can't know whether or not our pollution is changing the environment. But what we can tell is that our pollution is bad for the environment, that our pollution and our waste hurts native ecosystems and causes detrimental effects to the earth and the environment that we live in an immediate term. If long term, that's up for scientific debate. But if we can all agree that pollution is bad in the short and immediate term, then we can all agree that pollution is something we need to do something about. And pollution is something we need to do something about, and something we can do something about, especially carbon-based pollution. One of the quickest and easiest ways we can address carbon-based pollution here in the United States is to lift restrictions on the implementation of new nuclear reactors. Because technology has changed and advanced so much in the past few decades since the United States stopped building new nuclear reactors, that we have new Generation 4 fluorine salt molten thorium reactors, which are safe, modular, they're tiny. One of them can be about the size of my apartment. You don't need a giant plant to run one. And they produce more electricity with less fuel because they're fast-breeding reactors. And I'm not going to get into the science on that. It's a fascinating subject if you're into the science. With no pollution. And one of the best things about nuclear is any waste that is created by a nuclear reactor is self-contained instead of being released back into the atmosphere. And the math does support that the only way to reduce carbon-based pollution is to switch over to a nuclear-based fuel source. We can use Europe as an example. Unfortunately, solar and wind just aren't cutting it. Solar and wind are not having a big enough impact to show an actual net reduction in carbon pollution. The mining process for the precious metals and components to build solar panels is extraordinarily destructive to the local environment where they're mined. The byproducts from the construction of solar panels are filling landfills across Europe and creating uninhabitable zones that are destroying their local environments. And the solar panels themselves take years of operation continuously to offset their own carbon footprint from construction. Plus, you add in things like intermittency and the lacking technology in battery storage and the inability of those solar panels to produce enough energy, solar and wind, to actually fuel the area they're attempting to. And the data is unimpeachable. Germany is the world's leader in solar and wind renewable power resources. Yet Germany, a few years ago, had to start turning their coal-fired power plants back on because solar and wind, as the world's leader, they could not sustain their own demand. However, France went a different route. France embraced nuclear. France started building new nuclear power plants. They realized they were safe. They overcame the social stigma involved with nuclear. And France is the net lowest carbon polluter in Europe without solar and wind, while the world's leader in solar and wind right next door in Germany is lagging behind them and failing utterly to reduce their carbon footprint. And I do think it is important that we reduce our carbon footprint for the safety and health of the planet moving forward. I believe the best way to do that is by ending federal subsidies for fossil fuels, encouraging market competition and innovation for hybrid and electric vehicles to become more competitive price-wise and more affordable for the average American, and allowing new nuclear power plants to be built with new, modern, and safe designs that can help us overcome these burdens. George, do you think the government should have the right to impose mask requirements in outdoor places like public parks and playgrounds? No. It's as simple as that. Now, I'll catch some flack from at least somebody watching this, I know, but the government should have not have the right to impose mandates on anybody. Wearing a mask, whether or not it's a good idea, it should be a personal choice. It should be an assessment of risk, and an individual should know if I'm sick, maybe I should wear a mask. If I'm worried about getting sick, maybe I should wear a mask. The government shouldn't make those mandates. Now, if a private business makes a mandate and say you can't come in our store without wearing a mask, then wear the mask, because harassing and berating a 15-year-old cashier about why you don't want to wear a mask accomplishes nothing but allowing you to bully your way into violating a private business's private property rights. It's the prerogative of the business owners and management to determine what level of risk they are willing to accept for their employees in their store, just as it's your own prerogative to determine what level of risk you are willing to accept in your everyday life. So these, as far as a mandate goes, no. Do I wear a mask outside? Usually not. When I go into a store, usually. Some of the stores I shop at have requirements. They want every customer wearing a mask. I respect their wish and I wear one. Some stores don't, but they're cramped in small stores with poor ventilation, and I choose to wear a mask when I'm in those stores because I do have some pre-existing health conditions, and I do believe in the data that says COVID is a serious risk and a threat to people like myself. Even though I have not gotten it, even though I interacted with hundreds of thousands of people during our petition drive, and the several states I've been to helping campaign for the Joe Jorgensen campaign, I have not contracted it, and I've gotten tested regularly. I still do choose to wear a mask when I'm in conditions that may be higher risk to me and those around me. However, outdoors, I do believe the data has shown pretty solidly it's extraordinarily difficult to transmit or catch COVID in an outdoor setting or a properly ventilated setting. And I don't see the purpose in wearing a mask when you're hiking up Mount Monadnock on a Saturday. I don't see it when you're going to the playground. It doesn't make sense to me. The fresh air is healthier for you than rebreathing through the mask. So I would oppose any and all mandates because I do believe it's a personal decision. While I may choose not to wear one outdoors, other people may choose to wear one when they interact with me or others, and that is entirely up to them. So there is no way I would support a mandate. All right. Well, that does look like it is it for the questions that we have, unless there are any more that can pop up, but we are coming right up on an hour. So I do want to thank each and every one of you for participating, coming in. The questions you asked were some great questions, and we got to cover everything from the Supreme Court nomination to student loan debt to climate change. And I do believe this was a fantastic, and I look forward to doing this again. We're going to try and schedule a few more of these more regularly leading up to the election. So pay attention. Go like our Facebook page, Justin O'Donnell for U.S. Senate, New Hampshire. Make sure you share it. Invite all your local friends. You can like and share this video. Make sure we help beat Facebook's algorithm and get it out there. But once again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. And that's going to be it for tonight. And live free or die. Good night.